The lobby smelled like cedar and cinnamon, but the second the clerk shook her head, I knew something was wrong. 2 rooms under the Holloway name. That's your parents, plus your sister Victoria and her husband. No single reservation for you. I was standing there with a suitcase I'd packed for a family vacation in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and no room. I called my mom right there at the front desk. She answered laughing, Victoria's voice in the background asking if the hot tub was open. "Oh, sweetheart. I figured you'd handle it. You always do." She said it like a compliment. It wasn't. What none of them realized was that this moment would shatter everything. 6 weeks later, at a Thanksgiving table surrounded by 22 relatives, I'd open my mouth and say words that would leave my entire family silent and change who controlled the money forever. But before that, you need to understand what it felt like to be the daughter they never saved a chair for. If you've ever been the reliable one whose independence got mistaken for not needing love, this story is yours. I'm Elena, 33, senior financial analyst from Raleigh, North Carolina. I built my life alone. Coffee at 5:45 a.m. in my 1-bedroom apartment, 60-hour weeks, quarterly reports, a career I earned. Nobody paid my tuition. I worked part-time at a university library and graduated summa cum laude, while my best friend Mia cheered so loudly the chancellor flinched. My sister Victoria had every semester covered by our grandfather Joe, yet she dropped out after 1 term. She married Mark at 27, had a son Noah, and never worked again. Our parents never remarked on the contrast. Catherine was the one you sheltered. I was the one who never needed anything. I still drove 4 hours to every holiday, every birthday. I thought showing up proved I belonged. Last August, Mom called chirping about a gorgeous mountain lodge peak leaf season. Just us. I asked about my room. "Your father's handling it," she said. Dad's text later read all set. "Don't worry." I believed him. I shouldn't have. Friday morning, I loaded hiking boots, a bottle of wine I'd planned to share with Mom on a balcony, and drove 4 hours through those autumn postcard hills. I pulled into the lodge parking lot, heart actually light for once, walked inside, and the clerk's smile faded. 2 reservations. Parents in 1 room, Victoria, Mark, and little Noah in the other. My name, nowhere. Sold out peak season. I stood with my suitcase handle digging into my palm while the lobby noise swirled around strangers checking in. That's when the door opened and Victoria's heels clicked across the stone floor. She wore new boots, her husband trailing with bags. She saw me and halted. Not with surprise, but calculation. "What's the problem?" she said loudly. I told her there was no room. She shifted Noah onto her hip, glanced at Mark, then announced to the entire lobby, "We reserved rooms for me, my husband, and my child. We're the actual family." Mark's mouth twitched. Mom studied the floor. Dad stared at his phone. Other guests watched. I stood there, 4-hour drive burning in my legs, and understood with the cold clarity of a spreadsheet finally balancing. I was in a room full of people who shared my last name, and not one had saved me a place. I picked up my suitcase. Then, "I'll leave." No tears, no quiver. I walked out past the fireplace, past the averted eyes, into the parking lot where my car waited with that unopened bottle of wine still riding shotgun. Mom's voice cut across the gravel behind me. "Elena, don't be dramatic." I didn't turn. I drove 20 miles north to a tiny river town and pulled into a faded motel called the Creekside Inn. The desk clerk, a woman with glasses on a chain, gave me room for $89 a night, window facing the French Broad River. I locked the door, sat on a quilt smelling of lavender, and stared at my phone. 34 missed calls. 12 texts from Mom mapped her emotions like a stock ticker. Ridiculous. "You're ruining the trip. Victoria is upset." "Fine, be that way." Not one word of apology. Not one. That night I opened the wine alone, poured it into a paper cup, and listened to a ceiling fan tick while the river rushed past. Indifferent. By morning, the family group chat exploded with photos from the lodge poolside selfies, trail shots, captions like "making memories with the ones who matter." My name never appeared. I'd been erased. Then a text from my cousin Sarah. Are you on that trip? I don't see you in any pictures. I typed long story. And she sent back a single heart, a tiny anchor from a corner of the family I'd overlooked. Monday morning, standing at my motel window, watching a heron stalk the shallows, my phone buzzed again. Dad, Mom says you can share Victoria's room if you come back. We shouldn't book 2 rooms for someone who doesn't even bring anyone. Someone who doesn't even bring anyone. That was my worth after 33 years. I took a screenshot, set the phone face down, and felt the final thread snap. I spent the rest of that week walking the riverbank, thinking, I didn't want an apology anymore. Apologies in my family were reset buttons. They'd let me drive 4 hours again, set up chairs, stand at the edge of every photo, waiting. I was done, not with anger, but with the quiet finality of closing an unbalanced ledger. Then my phone rang with a voice that mattered. My grandfather Joe. He was 82, a self-made man who built a lumber supply empire from a borrowed flatbed truck. He'd been alone since Grandma May died, still living in their house on Lake Lure. He'd heard about the trip, just facts. No tears, and said, your grandmother would have walked out too. Then, he invited me to dinner. That evening at his kitchen table, over trout he'd caught. He asked sharp questions like a foreman on a job site. How much was Victoria's mortgage? Did Mark cover it? What did my father actually do at the company? I answered. And he finally set down his fork. I've been sending your parents and Victoria $7,000 a month for 13 years. Over $1 million. None of them had built anything. He looked at me. How much have I sent you? Nothing, Grandpa, I never asked. He nodded slowly. Then he said, I'm hosting Thanksgiving this year. Whole family. He hadn't done that in 6 years. Something was shifting, but he didn't explain. He just gave me the date. I drove back to Raleigh, returned to my spreadsheets, and let the silence with my parents become a boundary I'd chosen, not something they did to me. 6 weeks passed. Then Mom's group chat reappeared as if nothing had happened Thanksgiving at Grandpa's. Who's bringing what? Victoria chimed in about wine, bought with the credit card Grandpa still paid. Then Mom asked me to bring my sweet potato casserole. They expected me to peel, mash, and bake for 3 hours for people who hadn't booked me a bed. I wrote back, I'll be there. No emoji. They saw compliance. They didn't see the screenshot still on my phone. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Mom called, voice lowered. I know you're still upset. Victoria's under so much pressure Mark's hours got cut. The house payment. If your grandfather ever stops helping, I don't know what we'd do. For a second I heard real fear. Then she added, that's why it's easier when everyone goes along. She was asking me to disappear again. You kept the peace by giving away my chair, Mom. She hung up. A week later, Victoria posted a carousel of those mountain photos captioned grateful for the ones who matter. Over 200 likes. Not one person missing me. Sarah messaged again. What really happened? I told her flatly the rooms, the lobby, the words. Sarah told Aunt Grace, Grandpa's sister, a 78-year-old woman who never let go of a wrong. Aunt Grace called. Your grandmother would be heartbroken. The truth was spreading. Thanksgiving morning, I drove to Lake Lure early. I didn't stay with my parents. I'd booked my own room nearby. Grandpa Joe was already in the kitchen, making corn pudding from a recipe in Grandma May's handwriting. I helped set 22 places with her china, gold-rimmed plates that felt like memory. Guests arrived, Aunt Grace first, then Sarah, old business friends, and finally my parents and Victoria's family. Victoria swept in wearing a buttery cashmere coat, hugging Grandpa like the star of the show. The meal was warm, noisy, perfect, until Victoria lifted her glass for a toast. To family, to the ones who show up through thick and thin. She glanced at me on the word show up. I held my glass but didn't drink. The silent refusal was louder than any word. Later, clearing plates in the kitchen, Victoria cornered me. Are you going to be weird all night? You left. That was your choice. I set down a dish towel. Because you didn't book me a room. She tightened her jaw. You could have figured it out. You always do. There it was, the family's operating system. Elena handles things. Elena doesn't need inclusion. I walked back to the table without another word. Over dessert, as coffee was poured into those gold-rimmed cups, Victoria started telling the lodge story like a funny anecdote to a few relatives. And then Elena just walked out. So dramatic. The table turned toward me slowly, forks pausing. Aunt Grace put down her cup. I caught Grandpa's eye. He gave the slightest nod. I set my coffee on its saucer, the tiny clink ringing out, and spoke in the calm voice I use for boardroom presentations. Victoria, you're right. I left. But you forgot to mention you stood in that lobby in front of strangers and said you'd only booked rooms for the real family. The room went breathless. I turned to my father. And Dad, you texted me the next day that I could share Victoria's room. Because, and I quote, we shouldn't book 2 rooms for someone who doesn't even bring anyone. My father stared at his plate. Mom's hand went to her mouth. Aunt Grace's gaze could have melted steel. Victoria exploded, chair scraping back. Unbelievable. You come here playing victim? You're just jealous, you always have been. Mark joined in, she's always so dramatic. Aunt Grace's voice cut through. Victoria, sit down. It was the voice of 78 years of earned authority. Mom tried this isn't the place. But I stayed seated, hands flat. You called me not real family in a hotel lobby. I'm just telling the truth where people can hear it. Victoria shook her head, face flushed, calling me jealous. I didn't reply. The contrast in that room said enough, her standing red-faced, me still and quiet. Then Grandpa set down his coffee. Enough. The room went dead silent. He rose slowly. 82 years old. Every second waited. I started working at 16. Built my company from nothing. For 13 years, I've sent this family over $1 million. Mortgages, credit cards, cars. Not one of you built anything. His eyes swept over Victoria, my parents. The only one who never asked me for a cent is the only one who turned out like your grandmother. He sat down, picked up his coffee. Victoria opened her mouth. I'm done. Victoria, eat your pie. The period at the end of a sentence that would never be revised. The aftermath was swift. Victoria and Mark gathered their things and vanished. Catherine cornered me in the kitchen one last time, trembling. Do you realize what you've done? He'll cut us off because of your performance. I dried my hands. I told the truth, Victoria. Same way you told yours in the lobby. She had no response. Later, on the porch, my father approached, car keys in hand, Mom already in the passenger seat. I shouldn't have sent that text, he said without meeting my eyes. No, you shouldn't have. But you meant every word, you just never thought I'd say them out loud. He asked if I'd be okay. I looked at the lake. I've been okay for 33 years without a room, a chair, or a place in the photo. I'll keep being okay. He nodded, walked away, and the taillights disappeared around the bend. By December, the monthly transfers stopped. No announcement, just silence. Victoria and Mark sold the luxuries. Victoria got a part-time job for the first time in years and called me in January not to apologize, but to ask how to format her URSM. I walked her through it, because that's who I am. My parents downsized. Dad took a real job at 60. Mom eventually texted, I'm sorry about the trip. I'm sorry about a lot of things. I waited 2 days and replied, I know, Mom. The door stayed open, but narrow. Sarah and Aunt Grace and I built our own connection. Every other Saturday, I'd visit Grandpa on that porch, drinking coffee from Grandma's cups, watching the lake change. One spring morning, cherry blossoms drifting onto the gravel, he said, the best thing about building something yourself? Nobody can take it from you because they never gave it to you. I smiled and rocked in the chair that had always been mine. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't walking out of a lobby. It's walking back to the table, meeting your family's eyes, and speaking the truth in your own voice, on your own terms. If this story hits somewhere you've been carrying, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Elena, and this is Winds of Thought. If you found value in this, please like this video and subscribe. It tells me you want more stories like this. Drop a comment below and let me know. What would you have done at that front desk? The next story is already waiting.